he is the most requested guest of all of the mayoral candidates that I've interviewed thus far, both online and both just walking around the town. People are, the first thing they say is, when are you gonna invite that what's the guy's name? The stone guy. Sorry, bud. The stone, what's his name? The Stonebreaker. It's not Breaker, it's Breaker. And I get plenty of breakers. So the breakers want to hear Stonebreaker. Stonebreaker wants to hear Stonebreaker. Most requested. And a lot of people find him as the voice of reason amongst all of the candidates. A lot of people have mentioned to me that he is a welcome, refreshing change to all of the main candidates, the quote-unquote top five, as the media has been portraying in these debates. Whether that is true or not, we don't really know, right? Because there hasn't been a poll since May. I mean, the poll that they initially had didn't even have Mufi on it yet. So who knows what's going on with the pollers? Yes, DJ Pachi's here. And I think I saw Bud in the chat already, so let's get to it. This man, Bud Stonebreaker, for the people that don't know him, they're very curious about him, but they want to know more about him. This man, born in Wahiawa, spent his childhood in Sunset Beach with his parents, two older sisters. When Bud turned 11, his family moved from the North Shore to Honolulu. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, too. He graduated from Kaiser High School, and notably, this guy won 2 Hawaii State wrestling titles. We're going to talk about that, Bud. And the years after that, Bud's schooling took him to California. He trained for the ministry, then on to Oregon, where he wrestled for Pacific University. He won the NAIA national title in wrestling. Traveled and lived around the world: Russia, Czech Republic, Poland, Ukraine. Ambassador for the sport of wrestling, and a minister. And from 2000 to 2006, he served as state representative in Hawaii's legislature, where he was instrumental in passing such measures as, and I remember this one, this was the one involving pets. It was a measure involving quarantining pets on residents traveling back to Hawaii. It was a crazy thing that, Bud, you're here. Crazy thing when you bring a pet to the mainland, you gotta bring them back. You gotta quarantine them for 4 months, I think it was. So, Bud can maybe elaborate on that and how he got that figured out. He left politics in 2006 and he pursued his charitable work in the ministry. He pastors a small church in Wahiawa. We started a kalo farm. So let's bring this man in. Here we go. Let's add him in. And I should have turned on the light. Let's see if my light is working. As we wait for Bud Stonebreaker, I'm going to be without a third light tonight. But here we go.
Hey, good to finally meet you online, Eric. Man, I'm watching your videos. Sir. You're crushing it. You're doing such a great job.
Thank you very much, sir.
And Sterling, man, that guy's smart.
Sterling is something, huh?
Yeah, he's just, I mean, I saw him, I saw him at first, and he looks young and fresh. And then he speaks with all this wisdom. So I'm just like, okay, this.
And I hope Sterling's watching. He's out tonight, but he said he's going to watch.
I hope
very
so.
particular guy, so thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, Sterling's a great guy.
So I'm finally on. I'm finally on, and I'm going to give you my real personality, because I know I need a better personality from somebody I just watched recently. And but here's why. Can I tell you why?
Here we go.
The reason is because the stuff we're dealing with is really serious.
Yes.
It's really serious. So my political game face, the reason I'm in office is because this stuff, and your show says it all, sleep time is over. We have got to get involved, and we've got to get engaged. And so, but that's the fight in me. There's also the play, and that's another side, but I don't always put that on the front, because we're engaged in kind of a cultural tug of war. So that's probably the side that people might see, but I assure you, there is a fun-loving side to Bud Stonebreaker.
That's why you're here, brother. And so I still give you the parameters. There's not really much rules here. I'm basically just giving you the time to embellish. We're not dealing with any timers. We're not dealing with any bells or dings. I want you to really elaborate so people get to know you. So if you need to embellish on whatever you need to say when we go through the topics. I already have a lot of viewer questions already. People, I'm telling you that you are the most requested candidate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hope we get good viewership. Because a lot of it, I've been off social media for many years. Many years ago, Facebook, and like many people, you maybe you get the idea that I can make change through my keyboard. And in some cases you can, but in other cases, if it's not the full-time thing that you do, what happens is it becomes a source of anxiety. And for me, it was. I was on for a couple of years, but then I just felt like I wanted to breathe without any social media. So I've been off, but now for the past 5 weeks, all of a sudden, it's campaign time. Yeah. And I jumped in on the last day. So, you mentioned that, you don't like my marketing. I don't like it either.
We got to fix that, bud.
Well, here, the thing is you have 1 month. So that's what we've had so far.
Yeah.
I have not been gearing up to get back into politics because, I didn't want to run for mayor. I don't want the job. I have a job. I do want the job because I'm running for it, but it's not an ambition of mine. I'm not looking to run for higher office, run for mayor. Maybe I can. I'm not interested in a career in politics. I'm happy, very happy doing what I'm doing. And, but this thing came about with such sort of an emotional and a mental and a cultural perspective all in view, when I just felt like there was a moment where we needed somebody running for office that we could choose for freedom. And we could probably talk about the COVID issue the whole time, but suffice it to say for now, I see the direction the government's going in, and it is not good. The end is, well, I don't know. It seems, the World Health Organization says they're going to take people from their homes. Numerous health departments around the country have said they're going to knock on the door, and if you or any of your kids have it, they're going to take you from your home. That is scary. When Dr. Fauci said in the first couple of weeks, it's going to be a lockdown for 18 months and then the vaccine, I said, whoa, 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 whoa. You can't survive in a society with this kind of narrative. And thankfully, as time came out, as time went by with the COVID issue, we have a lot more science. Unfortunately, our leaders locally are still functioning on an old narrative. And that's based on, and we could spend a lot of time on this, and I'm not sure what your viewers want to talk about, but it was based on the imperial model written by Neil Ferguson in England, and it was based on numbers that the World Health Organization has given. And the World Health Organization is a compromised agency. They, in Japan, they had a measure in the government to change the World Health Organization to the Chinese Health Organization, and they garnered 500,000 signatures from the population to that effect because the World Health Organization, due to their negligence and their carrying water for the Chinese Communist Party, they covered up for them for weeks. And we understand that 95% of coronavirus cases could have been prevented if the World Health Organization did their job. So, when you have numbers coming out of an agency that's compromised and it's influencing policy in our local community, it's time to really pay attention, and it's time to stand up. And I know there are some people that don't really want to go into the communist aspect. I had a guy on Facebook say, "Why are you bringing this up? The Democrats did it in the past, and the Republicans did it in the past," and as if he thought that I was using it as a political technique. I'm not. We are having a cyber invasion from a foreign nation into our country right now, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. My friend Bob, he was reading his newspaper. He told me about this, and he's flipping through the sections. Is the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. He's got the front page of finance and sports, and then out is a new section he hasn't seen. It's called the China Daily. I have it at home. The China Daily. It's everything is pro-China. The cover of this, it looks like an addition to the paper, but it's paid. A lot of people are paying for advertisements, but trying to pass it off as news lately. Have you seen the midweek? Anyway, that's another story.
Right. No, that's another one. That's another hour.
So he called the Honolulu Star-Advertiser and said, "Why is the China Daily in here?" And there's an article from Xi Jinping. He wishes everybody well, grandfatherly type figure. There's an article on Hong Kong, how they're doing everything right. But if you ask anybody in Hong Kong, they will not say that the Chinese are doing it right. There's an article on Taiwan, which has come under the thumb of China. And then there's an article about how China is poised to create the first 2 billion coronavirus vaccines. It goes on to discuss how wrong the United States was. It even says a letter that was sent to the World Health Organization fails, as does other U.S. evil designs. That's a very close quote. That's not exactly, but it uses the plot. It uses the phrase "evil U.S. design." So, and it's discovered. Of course, this is produced by the Chinese Communist Party. It's not unknown. It's common. They invest millions in different newspapers around the country. But basically, right now, our local news is publishing communist propaganda. Yeah. And when you have, in any war, in any time in history, when you have a war, the enemy will drop leaflets over a city in order to change public opinion. We're experiencing that right now in our country. Yeah. And when you have the culture, well, first of all, we know that the coronavirus came out of China. Where and how exactly, there's a lot of discussion. Just next to a level 4 lab, but they're telling us it's bats. Okay, but we do know that, we found it unethical to fund coronavirus chimeric studies into how to splice that virus. And we stopped funding that, earlier, but money kept going through other channels, through Dr. Fauci to the lab in Wuhan, $3.7 million. I believe that was the number. So, all you got to do is read this stuff and you see, okay, this thing comes out. And now we have come under the same kind of political doctrine that says the only way to survive is to have a surveillance state, to have a police state. I'm a pastor, of course. And, a lot of these things, they did affect us, and we were careful. Of course, we love people. We want everybody to be sick. We don't want anybody to die or to get sick. I was very concerned at first, when the first figures came out. Especially for my parents. My sister, she's had some pneumonia problems in the past, and she would be a candidate for grave effect, if I could put it that way. So I was concerned. We were concerned. But what we began to discover is that the fatality rate was far lower, way lower. The World Health Organization said 3.4% fatality rate. Yeah. And it's not that. It's more in line with between 0.1 and 0.5, but it depends on the age group that we're looking at. But most epidemiologists and experts will say that this is on the level of a bad influenza season. And so, okay, we understand now that it's far milder, but the doctrine of the government is that we will continue to trace and track, and our cell phones are going to be connected. Now you have to be traced. And if you have a baby, I don't think you're going to have a baby, but my neighbor had a baby and they tested her for COVID and told her, if you have COVID, we're taking the baby. And when these kinds of things happen, we cringe when we hear about it in North Korea or China, but that kind of thing is happening right now in our neighborhoods. A woman in Canada, they took her baby, she tested positive for COVID. They did a C-section. She didn't see her baby for 55 days. Now you have to take the medical science into account and recognize that there is almost infinitesimally small risk for a young, healthy woman and a baby. And yet, so this kind of thing, this surveillance state, this separation of people, right now in Hawaii, there are physical people in the government following other people around, tracking them. Right. That is concerning for civil liberties. And so when I saw these things beginning to happen, I actually tried to get a couple of other candidates to run as early as January because I really felt that we needed change. And I was in office for 6 years, and when you're in the legislature, and you're in the minority party, it can be frustrating going to work every day just to lose. And I did that for 6 years. And we did make some changes. We had some rule changes, when Governor Lingle was in office. We had a number of people come and talk about the quarantine issue, and we were able to, set pets free from quarantine. Now I'm trying to set people free from quarantine. Well, but,
let me stop you here. What got you to leave in 2006? What led to that bunch of back here for the mayor?
That's a long conversation. However, I would say this. I wanted to do things that I felt that I could have more control over. When you're in the legislature, you have ideas, and they oftentimes get overlooked and they don't get heard. Especially when you're in the minority party, you just don't really get much of a seat at the table. In the meantime, I was traveling to South Sudan, which was Sudan at the time. There was a civil war going on, a lot of genocide. I was training some of the chaplains in some of the soldiers there. Also, I was doing some work in Cambodia. We were drilling wells for an orphanage and surrounding villages. And I felt that I just had much more value, and I was more satisfied and fulfilled doing those things that could actually bring help to people rather than trying to argue with people who aren't going to listen to you. So I decided to step out and just pursue the charity work and the ministry work. And a few years ago, we purchased a ranch out in Waimanalo. So we've been farming for the past year, just beginning to do that. And I love all of those things. And I'd be totally content in my life to do that. But when I see that the stakes are so high, that we're not talking just about whether we spend money on rail or the potholes, we're talking about the very freedom of people living in Hawaii. And I felt that we had to put somebody in there that understands that what's happening now is a narrative.
Yeah.
It is a narrative. It is an agenda. Our local leaders are following an agenda and a narrative. They're not following the science. And I can see the end of that narrative. The testing, that's bad enough. They're using the numbers now to get everybody panicked. They're changing the definition of a COVID case now. It's not an infection. It's anybody.
You bring up a great one, because I was going to ask you this. Regarding what is your take on the daily numbers? Now, every day we get the daily numbers, and it's 11:30, 12 o'clock. And then we react quickly. The mayor reacts, governor reacts. Like just today, we got the mandate of the gyms. Everyone's wearing a mask at the gym. Yep. 12 o'clock, midnight, we're stopping liquor. What would you do differently as mayor?
You know, sometimes there's these great shows on Alaskan wilderness living and survival. And I remember watching one where, they're putting these fish wheels in. The Yukon River is just vast. And at a certain time of the year, these fish will migrate, and they'll put these wheels in the water where a basket will lift up with the current, but it lifts up in such a way that it just catches all the fish that are swimming near the bank of the river, and they'll get hundreds. But the basket didn't put those fish in the river. They were always there. The basket only discovers the fish that were always there. The tests that we're doing are only discovering COVID cases that we have already had. We've always had these cases because most COVID cases are asymptomatic. And so when we had the earlier deaths, the numbers of COVID cases in Hawaii were far greater than those who are hospitalized. A very small percentage of people, in fact, Johan Kiseki, the director of the European CDC, he called this COVID, he called it a mild infection. I was surprised when he said that. And when I've repeated it, I've gotten anger from people. And I say, I didn't say that. A world-renowned health expert said that it's a mild infection. In the next sentence, he said it's a mild illness. And he said 99% of people will pass this with flu-like symptoms. And then he said in that last 1%, a small percent will need to be hospitalized. A smaller percent will need to be put on oxygen. A smaller percent will have to be put in ICU. And the smallest percent, 0.1 to 0.2% will pass away. But most of the time, these are people with pre-existing conditions. They're predominantly elderly. Their median age has been about 80 to 83 years old. Nationally, 80% of the people who have died of COVID are over the age of 65. Yeah. So it really mildly affects the working population, especially children in schools. But what we see here is that these guys aren't following that. They're following some other program. And I suspected it from the very get-go that they're going to try to do this till November. They're trying to do this till the election. And so I don't think that it's completely about keeping people safe. And I don't think it's completely about the virus itself, because the virus is far milder than we said. So when I saw all these things happening, I thought, none of these candidates understand this. And if they don't understand the big picture, I don't trust them to take care of the little things. So I threw my hat in the ring, and
you did. And I gotta say, speaking of the little things, okay. So this is the thing that I want to bring up. Well, I want to get right to this. Let's get to a viewer question here. Let's. I think we're all healthy on this chat. I hope. But we got a small business owner question. Small business restaurant owner in downtown, Chinatown and downtown, have always had issues with homelessness and individuals who are mentally ill. Union Mall and 4th Street Mall have become open-air drug markets. Not uncommon to see individuals injecting drugs openly in broad daylight. How will you be able to clean up the open-air drug markets in the city center?
Well, first of all, you have to have a prosecutor and a police department that are working together. Some of the candidates running for prosecutor want things like no bail release, and that, these kinds of things that are being discussed will be detrimental for peace and safety and security in Honolulu. So first of all, we need a prosecutor that is going to follow through and prosecute, so that the police officers that are on the street don't get frustrated, because they're doing a tough job and they're coming under enormous criticism now, partly for things that have been, unrelated to local law enforcement. And so we have to be really careful that we don't have a breakdown in morale in our police department. So one of the first things that as the mayor I would do is I'd make sure that the police department is amply supplied, but also we do want the transparency that has harmed us in the past, because we've had some corruption. And it's bad. And we want to make sure as much of it as we possibly can find is dealt with. In that case, what you can begin doing, you can begin enforcing. And so for the homeless problem or the houseless problem, I live in Waimanalo, and I have a lot of friends that are houseless. They consider Waimanalo to be their home. They just don't have a house. And neither did many, many ancient Hawaiians. They lived, the whole summer at the beach, and they would go back up Mauka when, it got colder and so forth. So living outdoors is not completely foreign to our culture. So the thing we have to remember is that a top-down approach, if you have a system where the government, the mayor, let's say they build a place in Kaka'ako or, downtown near the airport, nobody is going to go there from their communities. People in Waimanalo are not going to leave here to go downtown. And people in Waianae are not going to leave because that's where they have roots. That's where they have family. So first of all, we need to support local efforts to help those who are homeless and provide places for them. Then, and only then really, can you begin to enforce, because that's the other side. And many of the candidates, they're either sympathetic and compassionate on one side, which is good, it's important, or they're law enforcement on the other side. What we need is both, because when we have a place for them, then we can enforce with the conviction that we're doing the right thing. Now, there's another issue that we don't always talk about, and that is when other cities send their homeless people here, give them a one-way ticket, and they make it our problem. I believe that we should just send them back to where they have a support system, their own home city or their own hometown. That shouldn't be a burden that we have to bear.
Anybody you recommend or you're backing for prosecutor right now? What's your favorite?
Yes, and I have not voted yet. So I'm still looking, but I like Alm, I like Brown, and I like Kyle. But of those three, I'm going to make a pick. And probably in that order as well. So.
Okay, wow.
I'm still looking.
Everybody caught that lineup. All right, our ranking. We got to get to this one, bud. This is a big one. You've talked about this a lot. Department of Planning and Permitting.
Okay.
Don't take an hour for this one, bud. But wait, I know you're passionate about this one. Many small business owners, they view the fast track application. They it's like a type of legal extortion. People think it is. If elected, how will you change the status quo and create a friendlier, more efficient DPP?
Well, people are frustrated because they can't get a permit to put their ADU up or to renovate or to add a room.
Yeah.
And we have an affordable housing crisis here in Honolulu. That's another subject, but we should make the Department of Planning and Permitting friendly to people. Most people feel like when they go to a city department, they feel uneasy. They feel like, maybe they're going to make somebody mad or they're going to do something wrong, because it's very difficult sometimes. So there are people that are frustrated. The other thing is that when you can't get a permit, but then you find out from your neighborhood board that somebody's going to put a condominium in the middle of, Kailua. And many of the permits are just fast-tracked. First of all, it's not fair. Secondly, they weren't consulted about it. Thirdly, the studies and the numbers, there's this one in Kailua right now that they want to put 72 units on less than an acre right next to O'Reilly's in the middle of Kailua. It's always congested there, always traffic. 72 units with 56 parking. Now, already we got, fellas, going off 56 parking for 72 units. What does that mean? People are going to, more parking on the street. Well, that doesn't sound right. But then they did a traffic study and it was in the middle of the lockdowns. And they said, well, it's not going to affect traffic. Of course it's not. Nobody's driving right now. So a lot of these things happen and people get very angry because they don't feel like their voice is being heard. It feels like only people that pay can play. Some companies, larger companies, they do this because it's just a matter of practicality. They have to pay somebody to push their permit through. Now, they shouldn't have to do that, but what has become the norm is almost an embedded or a systemic kind of corruption, where you have to ask somebody to push your permit because there's not an equity among all people. But those are the kinds of things that if we are practical and we take a relatively tough approach on ourselves, as I'm speaking as the mayor, I will be willing to be tough on myself and our departments if we fail. And we will do what we need to do to restructure so that we can serve the people of Hawaii. So the permitting department will do everything we can to clean that up and make it more consumer friendly.
Yes, most definitely needs to be. Let's go right to the rail. Where are we stopping the rail? Middle Street? What are we doing?
Well, here's I'm just going to give a disclaimer. All these candidates, we're all trying to understand everything. And I have been farming for the past year. I haven't been dealing with heart. I don't know all the details. I am studying like I got dropped into a class just before the final exam. So can I just say at the outset, I don't know everything there is to know about this, but I do know a lot. And I look to other experts who have all the answers and the knowledge. So right now we're about 90% complete to Middle Street. Hypothetically, if we focused, we could get that section, that first 16 miles, running by 2022. And as soon as it's running, we'll begin to generate some riders' fare. It's, there's a fare box portion that some of these things are interesting. The initial cost. And by the way, I was there from the very beginning. The state had to allow for the city to raise taxes. So I voted no. I said there's nothing more permanent than a temporary tax increase. And my words I wouldn't say they're prophetic, but they keep extending this tax increase. And now what they're saying is the numbers show that the general excise tax that generally goes to rail will cover basically the cost of operation. So that is going to be a very tempting thing for the next mayor to just keep that temporary tax permanent to pay for the operations. Otherwise, where are we going to get $150 million from? Right. So we could get it running up to Middle Street. And from there, rather than investing heavily in what will be a much more delicate and tricky portion, because for 16 miles, it's been in the country. It's been out, it's more rural. But now we're talking about high rises. We're talking about buildings that have deep foundations. And these foundations for the rail are going down 300-400 feet. And the ones at Middle Street, they're curious about what's down there. They're trying to find. So I foresee some very tricky things with some buildings, and the cost rises. So far it's doubled. Well, I don't trust any of the numbers, because what we see is that the overall cost that they proposed to us in the beginning turns out to just be a down payment. And so what was early, by the way, early, the behind the scenes talk was that it was going to cost 2.7 billion. And then the public cost was 4.7, and then it was 5.2, and then it continued. Now we're up at around 9.4, 9.6, but we're falling another 100 million short. They told us last year that we're going to run 100 million short, and now with this COVID situation, without the general excise tax being collected, there's going to be shortfalls all over the place. So we don't want to extend our construction so far that it obligates us. Now, here's the other thing. The other obligation that we're seeing is because initially the federal government was going to give us $1.55 billion, and they gave us about half of that. And so we have another $750 million that we will get as we complete it. The question is, we've gotten almost $1 billion from the feds, but we've had to spend $9 billion to get it. Is that what we're hoping to do again? Are we going to spend $9 billion to get 750 million or 5 billion but we don't know the numbers. They're saying, I don't know, I read one number, 444 million for the last 4 miles, but I just can't see how that's reasonable. But I could be mistaken about that number. So I think that here's the best thing. Imagine this. People that ride it get off at Middle Street. There are shops, cafes. You can, get a cup of coffee or have breakfast or meet somebody there. And there are express buses. This is not a typical bus depot where you have stop, stop, stop. No, there's one bus to Ala Moana. There's one bus to Waikiki. and maybe there's 2 buses to town, and you can get off at one of 2 sections, but there's no stops. They're quiet, electric. You get off your train and you get on a bus and you get right into Honolulu within minutes. The traffic will be much lighter. I imagine that that's a good place to pause. And let's see what happens for the next 4 miles. Let's not stop completely. Let's pause. Let's hold up. Let's get our economy going again before we, I mean, because if we have to carry this thing like a heavy backpack, you know, and we're trying to tread water, I don't know if it's the wisest thing to do. So I think we should pause at Middle Street or one past.
Let's look at other ways to get revenue going in that sense then. Here's a viewer question. We got gambling and recreational smoking of marijuana. Both are extremely prevalent in our community. What do you think on that one? Would you explore these vices as viable industries?
I'd explore maybe the latter, but I don't think that we want to bring gambling into Hawaii, because what that would do is that would change our culture fundamentally, completely. We would, you know, one thing that we don't recognize that's so wonderful is that when we drive, you know, through town, we don't have billboards. And you know, as a kid, I remember going to California and we drive and you see all these billboards, these big signs on the side of the freeway. And as a kid, you know, my eyes would light up like, wow, look at these signs and these giant pictures. And, but you know, the older you get, you realize, thank heavens, you know, for the outdoor circle and people who have stood so strongly against things like that, because we know billboards would change our islands. And so it's best that we keep them out. Gambling's the same thing. It's one of those things that has too many seedy elements to it. It has too many areas that we already have problems with, you know, the underworld or crime or things like that. It even creeps into our police department. The last thing we need is to open a door for something that will change the aloha state. Now, recreational marijuana, that is something that I think is something worth exploring. I know that people use medical marijuana, and so that's an area that we would be willing to look at.
Another viewer question. They're coming in hot here. Will police be used to intimidate and arrest Hawaiians peacefully protesting the further desecration of their lands through corporate greenwash projects like the AES Kahuku Wind Farm? Never went through proper environmental assessments and was pushed through despite very strong resistance from the Kahuku community. What will you do to address these conflicts? These large corporations coming in, they drown out the community.
Yeah, that's one of, it's a little bit tricky, this one, because the police were doing their job, but the problem came years before when these things went through. I grew up on the North Shore. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, we rode motorcycles at Comsat. I rode my bike up and down there. I was either going to go to Wailu or Kahuku, but when we moved to town, then years later, when I bent back, all the windmills were up. And the people were very frustrated and upset about it. And then, you know, a couple of years ago, they moved all the ones from the west side over there, and they were mad about it again. But nobody listens. And that changed that landscape out there. So I'm opposed to those things. I don't believe that we should look at profits no matter what the cost. I'm generally a conservative when it comes to political things, but probably in one sense, I'd consider myself libertarian. I just believe that the government should step away and allow people to function. So when it comes to things like that, we have to be careful not to fall onto a bandwagon of saying, well, you know, the cops shouldn't have done that, because I'm sure they didn't want to. I'm sure they did. Hopefully they didn't want to. But the real problem lies that the government didn't listen at an earlier state. You know, the neighborhood board out there, they didn't want that. They didn't vote to approve that, and they did it anyway. So, you know, there's things like in my neighborhood, the Sherwoods issue. There was a great concern and there was a great outcry, and the project was stopped like it was on Mauna Kea. TMT has been slowed down, and we'll see what happens in the future. But to me, that just represents the Hawaiian people are very frustrated that they have not been listened to for many, many years. And we could talk about this in other areas as well. Talk about the promise from 100 years ago that Hawaiians would have land, and many people died on the waiting list. And thank heavens that, you know, a court case just cited in their favor, and you know, rewards are going to be given. But you shouldn't have had to wait that long. People shouldn't have to wait that long. We need to fulfill our obligations and our promises. So many of those issues had to do with the Native Hawaiian population because they don't want to see their, and neither do I. I'm a Keikio Kaina, and this is my land as well. And I don't want anything that any, investor that waves some money in front of some politician's face to just get their way. We need to listen to the people. People's word needs to be listened to. And, if there's one person opposing out of thousands that don't, we have to be sensible and reasonable. But in general, these areas, the Sherwoods, the Kukia, Imana, and the windmills have been areas where people have vocally spoken out in mass. And so they shouldn't have to go to protests. That's how I feel. Many things are accomplished through protests, but that's because the government's not listening. And if the government listened, we wouldn't have to panic at the last minute when we find out a condo's going in next door and they don't have to get any of the permits. So people are frustrated about that.
I totally agree. Not enough people listening. But if your question kind of ties into that, how do you think we can bring the community together to take care of Diana? How can we all come together finally? That's a tricky one, huh?
I think, it's a big one. I think it might have to do more with a philosophy.
Yeah.
When you have the same people running the same things in the same way through the same systems and the same, networks, of course things are going to get stagnant. They're going to get stale. You need to flush the drainage ditch. In that case, you got to get the garbage out.
Drain the swamp.
And that could be said as well. I think when you have a new approach. Yeah. It's funny in these forums, somebody will say, I have been in there for 20 years trying to make a change. And now that's why I'm here to make a change. I'm the change. It's like, really?
Right.
You're the guy that got us into all this stuff. What are you talking about? You couldn't get more embedded than some of the candidates in politics, 50 years in Hawaii. So clearly, I have some experience. I mean, I got out though, and I was never in the majority party, so it wasn't like I got any deals from being in office. Nobody treated me any differently, except I did. Some of my phone calls got returned more than before I was elected. So.
I bet that goes on. I gotta say this, as you make your way back into the mix, into the mess, I guess.
Yeah.
How do you see everything with the election now? People are voting already. How do you see everything going? What do you think is gonna? How is everything going with you? Election time's coming August 8th.
Well, here's my situation. I got in late.
Yeah.
But the first poll that was done, I think there was about 60% of people that were undecided. So it was too early. And I didn't have a big war chest, but I have a message that people hold dear. Because I don't just want freedom for me. I want freedom for you. And I want freedom for people that disagree with me on some things. Because without freedom, we can't have a forum.
Yeah.
And without a forum, we can't even have the meeting of the minds. Because I'm made better by people that disagree with me. And so I appreciate them. But without freedom, we don't have any of that. And really, the government should be afraid of the people, not the people afraid of the government. Our republic was founded upon the idea that we have innate rights from God. Some people don't. They think, oh, you shouldn't bring God into the equation. You're a pastor. You shouldn't be running for office. Listen, what you want in somebody that's holding office is somebody that's concerned with what's going to happen after this life. If I'm corrupt, I believe that I will be held accountable for it. So I have my own private government. In the old days, they just said, he's a fearer of God. And that's an important thing because you want somebody that is doing the right thing, not because the people are watching, but because they have a conscience. So I don't think that being a pastor or being a Christian uniquely qualifies me for office. I mean, I do have a staff. I have to make payroll. I have maintenance on the land. I've run different businesses. I've got a lot of experience with people. But what it does do, it affords me the opportunity to say that I really believe that my greater concern is not for how people judge me, but for how I'll be judged in the afterlife. I want to do the right thing because I will answer to a higher authority. And I do. I believe in God, and I'm a Christian. And so were our founders, you know. And so the form of government that we have, we're blessed because of it. We're blessed because we have individual freedoms and rights. And you have a freedom of expression. And, you know, we have certain rights that are, the government's job is to protect our rights. And many people get the idea that the government gives you your rights. But that's not the way that our government works. And that's why we're blessed. That's why people have freedom to agree or disagree. They have freedom to protest and, you know, burn things and get very upset. And we're grateful for that freedom, but that freedom needs to be protected and defended. And when the government stops protecting those freedoms, that's when we need a change. We don't need a politician, because a politician is somebody that puts their finger to the wind and says, oh, where are the people going? Oh, they're not leading, they're following. We need a statesman or a stateswoman who does the right thing because it's the right thing. And I hope that that's what I bring to the table. And I think that's what's resonating with people, because right now the word of mouth and the grassroots activism of my supporters it's just amazing. It's amazing because when people are helping me campaign, I feel like they're running for themselves. They're campaigning for themselves because they're campaigning for their own future and their own freedom. And so that's where our campaign is. Our campaign is not with the most and the biggest signs. I don't have the money, and I haven't had the time to raise the money for lots of expensive ads. And so when you see something from me, it's probably because somebody told you. It's not because of an ad campaign. And so that's why it's exciting, because everywhere I go, I'm getting this. And somebody told me that a friend of theirs told them that they got a phone call, and it was from the Hanneman people, Mufi Hanneman's people. And she said, oh, no, and it was a friend of theirs. I actually knew them. So she said, I'm voting for Bud Stonebreaker. And her friend on the phone laughed. And she said, that's what everybody's saying. So I'm excited about that.
Right.
And
you know what?
I think people are tired of hearing these pat answers. I have no notes before me tonight. I don't have any script. I didn't have my computer because the battery died. I'm just speaking from my heart.
Yes.
And I love these islands and these mandates and this government. It's not, you see, I talk about the COVID stuff sometimes, but the thing is that they're treating the COVID the same way they treat everything, with overkill. It's just too much bureaucracy, too much. All of the authority and the power is centralized within the government. It's not in the hands of the people. So the COVID thing, that's concerning because we're still in the middle of it. But when you talk about the way that they approach things, their approach to this is overkill. You know, sometimes it's an interesting metaphor, because with COVID, as it was the case with the Spanish flu, influenza, many of the people, and the Spanish flu was worse because it was the young, healthy people that died because their immune system was so strong. They had a cytokine storm, which causes infection and inflammation. And then, you know, so what can happen with COVID-19 is that the immune system overreacts and it attacks itself. It causes the lungs to be inflamed. That causes infection and so forth and so on, which is, it's good to know, because now there's great treatments. Budenicide, which is, I think, Pulmicort is the brand name. It's even in a generic now. Dexamethasone, zithromycin, hydroxychloroquine works. And that's an interesting discussion. I made a video about it with my wife last night. We Facebook Lived it. But we have great treatments. So we have really good news moving forward. We can move forward and we can do it wisely and safely. But if they think the way they've always thought, we're going to get the same results that we've always gotten, but this time it will be much worse. And so the word of mouth is where people are sharing our message, and it's exciting to watch. And I believe that good things are going to come from it.
Well, I love the fact that you're going to get rid of all the abandoned cars, but I really am excited for that.
Well, I live in Waimanalo, so
fantastic video. Let's get these cars out of here.
I didn't have to go. You want to know something? We went to talk about the food bank, because the state is no longer subsidizing the food bank. It's all private donations now, and that's not going to last forever. So we have to look on the horizon. But we were there to film there, and we just looked around, and that Mapuna Puna, you know, those title things have ruined so many cars for so many years and nothing's been done. But
Right.
the abandoned car was there, and the homeless were there as well. So, but I could do that in my own neighborhood.
Right.
And
No, I thought it was a very simple video. Nobody's ever done that angle before. Let me get you some more viewer questions here. We got one.
yeah.
Here we go. Do you believe in unions? Is a viewer question. Education is one where it seems to protect the teachers more than the students. What's your take on?
Oh, like unions in school?
Yeah, I guess we're specifying that one. Teacher unions.
Well, the teachers union is the HSTA.
Yeah.
And then in the administration, so this is kind of an area where it's not always fair for the teachers, because a larger union, the HGEA, they're a lot of the administration, and so being a smaller union, they don't always get what they ask for. But a lot of those things are through the state. That's through arbitration and stuff like that.
Right.
And so I think I was in the union. I was in the carpenters union, and so and I understand hard work. I have calloused hands, and so I love that. But we have to remember that people should be free to work and vote the way that they want to. I have lots of friends that are in the unions, and yet the leaders will tell the whole group how to vote, and many of them, they think for themselves and they have their own opinions. And so sometimes, in Hawaii, if I was endorsed by the police union when I was in the State House of Representatives, and I wasn't in the race when they endorsed Blangiardi. So maybe I was too late for that. But be that as it may, I think, I know so many police officers as well. And so the word is out that I support our men and women in blue. These are areas where so many people are part of unions, and they're good people. And so I do support them, but we have to be fair when we're looking at what's going to happen next year. Next year we're going to have a great deal less money in the government, and in a normal family, if your budget isn't going to be reached, you cut spending, you don't borrow. And so we want to be cautious to think that we're going to borrow $2.3 billion to afford pay raises. Many people have lost their job. Now is no time for, state representatives, senators, or the, council members, or even upper level administrative departments to be getting pay raises. That doesn't seem fair to me. So you got to take everything in balance. Right.
Here's this. Go throw this one in here. What time we got? We got 10 minutes left, I believe.
Okay.
We're gonna make it. What are your thoughts here? Your question. What are your thoughts on the LGBTQ community? Are you for or against gay marriage?
Well, the mayor's office doesn't have anything to do with that.
We're getting all kind of wild ones, but
I have gay friends, bisexual. I love them. I just gave. It's a funny story, but I'll probably save it for another time. But I love everybody, and I want freedom for all people. And I've never turned anybody away from my house or our church property. And so I have a heart full of love for all people. So
I know you do, sir. I know you do. There's another one. Opinion on the use of masks being mandated and the mandatory use of masks. Are you for the mandatory masks in gyms? I guess that happened this afternoon. Would you have gone that route?
My own family. My wife, amazing woman. I love her. She got our family a group membership to the YMCA just down the street. So for the first, 6 weeks, we were all working out. We're having a great time. I was like Bob on Bob the Incredibles. I'm like the old man trying to get in shape again, right? Just lifting weights. And I was making progress, so I was excited. And then and everybody, we were working out together. We'd go to the gym as a family, and then all of this stuff happened, and then they started opening up gradually, and they require the masks and so forth. And my wife and my kids and myself were just like, we don't want to do that. And here's the tricky thing is masks are now they're a symbol for virtue signaling. When you wear a mask, you feel like you're helping, but you don't know if you're helping or not. See, because masks are not effective. When you wear a mask, you touch your face 5 times more often than you would without a mask. You put it on, you take it off. My daughter, she was laughing the other day because she saw somebody at the bus stop. They pulled their mask off and they sneezed, and then they put their mask on. And I've seen somebody do that myself. Or they'll pull it down to smoke a cigarette. And there are different kinds of masks.
Yeah.
And some work in some situations, other work in other situations. But the bottom line is that masks are absolutely 100% ineffective unless you wash your hands before and after use. Okay, what about the doorknob on the building that you went into, or the buttons that you push, or the handrail, or the pen that you signed with, or the tray at the restaurant, or the fork, whatever, we touch everything. Money, thousands of people, money is, notoriously filthy and germ-ridden. So the wearing of masks gives us the impression that we're doing something, but it also creates an emblem of who is buying into the narrative and who isn't. And so I know many people that don't like it, but are sort of forced to do it because restaurants are being pressured by the government. I don't blame them.
Right.
If they're going to be shut down because they don't enforce this, eventually we're going to get to the point to realize that we're in a constitutional crisis, and the government that's over us right now is not legitimate. Because the governor, he had his orders, his emergency orders, but those were only lasting for 60 days. Now I think we're on the 9th or the 10th, addition to that. We're about 90 days or 80 days past the emergency window. And so he has to prove that there's still an emergency. And 2 years ago, when we had almost 600 deaths from the flu, we didn't have any kind of lockdown or mandates like we do now. But we've had, about 25. They've added numbers, but one lady lives in Arizona. I don't know why they're counting that for here. People that have COVID that are from Hawaii but live in other states, they count for our numbers. And, the numbers game is crazy. So when all of the numbers have been skewed, from the coroners being told in New York to add COVID to death certificates, to hospitals adding COVID when COVID patients were not COVID positive, to get federal subsidy, the numbers have been tweaked and spun and skewed from the get-go. Nobody can argue that. The numbers are so messed up. So every time the government uses numbers, you have to question it. And they're using numbers to create fear. And their answer seems to be wear masks. Well, if masks work, why didn't they put them on the prisoners that they released from prison? I mean, right now in our country, we have prisoners being released by the thousands in California and in Hawaii and in other places. And rioters rioting with hands off from the government. Like, oh, that's fine. Everybody should do that and burn this and it's no problem.
Right.
But then you can't get a haircut, or you can't, go to a restaurant. You can't go to church. They told the lounge, the bars and the entertainers in Waikiki, no singing. That was a mandate, no singing. And you think, well, why? This must be a really terrible plague, right? Well, no, it's one, what is 25 of 600?
Right.
It's 1/25 of what a normal flu season was. What in the world is happening? And then they'll say, well, we stopped it. No, we didn't stop it. The peak was before we even had the lockdowns, the mandates. I mean, the CDC numbers, show that we were dropping and the rates of death were falling. That's why the rates of infection, or the cases, right? Because they're not infection. It doesn't have to be infection. It has to be a suspected infection, which means you have to fall into one of two categories. And if you live in an area that has COVID cases increasing, for example, you already qualify in Hawaii because there are cases increasing. And if you cough or you have a headache, then you could technically be counted as a COVID case. And on top of that, everybody now that goes into a hospital, bust your knee, you get a sprained ankle, you got kidney stones, you go and you get tested. If you happen to be positive, you have now become a COVID hospitalization. So some of these things aren't clear, and the government's not making them clear, which, causes us to be suspicious.
With that said, we got 2 minutes left, bud. But there's a few. Here's a
This is
shocker.
fun. I could go on. I could go on, but I know you're interviewing somebody after
just
this.
like that. Well, let's do it overtime. I've been doing let's do it overtime. I've been doing that already with these
Sure.
other guys. So what the heck? So what's going to happen is I'm going to shut it off now so that I'm going to restart it, and then
Okay.
you'll just see me on again, and you just jump on again, and then I got some more
All right.
viewer questions. So you got the
Okay.
time? Are you all right for like
Sure.
10
I'm
minutes?
happy to
Okay.
do it. I'm having fun.
All right. Okay. Everybody watching, we're going to be back on in like a minute. Okay. But we'll be right back. But Stonebreaker, here we are. I'm sorry, Instagram. Welcome to Instagram Live, bud.
Oh, I love it. It's it's fun. Are you gonna bring that in here?
Who you got
So
in? Yep. Okay.
we're coming back. We're saying hello to say goodbye.
We're saying hello to say goodbye, but we got a lot of viewer questions though. Like I got, I'm gonna throw another one.
I apologize. I wasn't really looking at those. I get distracted. I want to see that.
Where are you? Are you at your house right now, or are you at your
No, I'm at work.
the headquarters? Okay.
I thought maybe I would just
You bring.
I'll just let you interview this guy.
Look at that shot. You have a shirt? Do you have shirts of that?
Yeah, we do.
I'm sure you.
Somebody was body
That's a
surfing.
good
No,
look.
they're bodyboarding the other day, and they were in this nice fat barrel, and you could just see my face under his face. It was a cool picture. I'm like,
It's a
dude,
good
that's
image.
great.
It's a, let me throw this one at you. We got okay, unemployment ending in like several days from now. The 600 plus is gone right now.
You know,
What are we gonna do about this unemployment office that just was in such disarray when this happened? How are we fixing that?
oh, well, there's a couple of things I would say about that. First of all, I'm sorry on behalf of the government. I get questions. People are asking me, what can I do? And I'd like to help them, but right now I'm just a citizen. So I've looked in and the unemployment office. You look at their ratings. Their ratings are like 1 star out of 5, maybe 1.5 stars out of 5. So maybe they're understaffed. I don't know exactly what's happening there, but I'm sure that that's very frustrating. But one thing that I hope that you and your listeners or whoever's watching knows is that you will be taxed on that unemployment. And so at the end of the year, it's going to come back to bite you unless you are saving a portion for that. So I hope people don't. It's going to be rough if all of a sudden they find out they got to pay a couple $1,000s of taxes for that. So, well, the first thing to do is get back to work. Many of these candidates in these forums, they're treating the federal government almost like grandpa, and like he's going to come and pay for everything. And so they're keeping these shutdowns going, I think, hoping that they're going to get a massive payout per state or per city. But I don't think that that's the first line of defense. If we can, we should get everything that we can from the federal government if it'll help. But the first thing we should do is go back to work. And then we'll follow up with the unemployment checks if there's been a backlog there. So we got to get back to work.
Yeah. When would you have opened up Waikiki?
Well, I believe that what we should do, because we were initially told to flatten the curve, we should look at the curve. And in one sense, we need to be more concerned with our hospital capacity than we are with the numbers. And I know that testing has been the avenue of choice, but the reality is that a better way to go is to look at the curve. Now, right now, but we have to remember also that there is going to be some high numbers for the next couple of months because everybody's put off their surgeries, their treatments for a few months. So the hospital capacity is going to be higher than normal. It doesn't mean that it's COVID. It just means that there are people catching up. You had to postpone your hip surgery, cancer treatments or so forth. So those things will gradually slow down, but we watch that. And when we watch that, then, I don't know if having all of these numbers and now the new definitions is going to help us in the long run. Because the numbers now, if you take somebody that's only potentially infected and you couple that with hospitalizations, if somebody's only potentially infected and they go to the hospital and now they're counting that as a COVID hospitalization, now you can see how convoluted those numbers can get, how quickly. So we're moving into an area where things are very nebulous and it's going to be very easy for the media or the government to use figures to keep people in a state of fear. And I don't think that we should be living in a state of fear. There are good treatments. We shouldn't be afraid to go to the hospital right now. Many people are. We should be educating doctors, and doctors should be educating other doctors, because there are many great treatments, especially when it's caught early. Some people are afraid to go to the hospital, and so they're not reaching out to their doctor. But if our local doctors, they're well capable of finding out the best treatments, and it's not a death sentence to get COVID. Most people will likely get COVID-19. We have to recognize that coronaviruses are common in our system. Almost every single person has been exposed and has caught a kind of coronavirus. The cold, sometimes you'll go to the doctor and he or she will say, you have a cold, it's a viral cold, right? And you have to treat it a little differently. Sometimes you take antibiotics, but that's because it's trying to keep, ward off any infections and so forth. But 20% of the time, a viral cold is caused by 4 different kinds of coronavirus. So we all have had a kind of coronavirus. I know it's not the same. Please, people, don't accuse me of saying it's the same thing. I'm just pointing out that this is something that we should become familiar with, because when we're ignorant, we're in darkness and we're susceptible to fear and manipulation. And if we know, however, that the family of coronavirus is common in our pets, it's in our own bodies, then we recognize that, okay, this is something that I can get treatment for. And it's not a death sentence. Dr. Birx, one of the president's advisors on medical things, said early on in this that everybody will get coronavirus. And so we have to recognize that natural herd immunity comes when people get infections, and then they pass those infections and they have antibodies, and they become the sort of the front line for the next time that virus comes around. And so people catching coronavirus is not necessarily bad news. People dying from it, yes. What we need to do is protect the elderly population. And so Waikiki, I know it's a long answer to the question. Yes, Waikiki should be open. And if you have pre-existing conditions, or if you're elderly, you have to be cautious and you might need to stay away, but you need to do that on your own volition and with the advice of your doctor. And then we can move forward. And I think we can move forward prosperously.
So the idea of things that have been coming up as far as ideas of a quarantine hotel, or the quarantine itself that's been going on. Mm-hmm. What do you think as far as safety regulations would be in place that you...
I don't even like the sound of that, I don't know why, but it just strikes me. I lived in the former Soviet Union. I lived in Moscow in 1990. I saw what these kinds of policies do to a population. When these overbearing government control policies come, now they're coming now because we have ostensibly a health crisis. But the reality is it's not as much of a crisis as they want us to believe. It's a manageable crisis. Yes, it's real. Yes, we should be concerned. And yes, we should not send coronavirus patients to care homes like other governors have done. I mean, Governor Cuomo in New York avoided using the hospital ships that were sent there by the president. I think they had thousands of beds and doctors were sent as well, but they didn't use them. And the governor sent the coronavirus patients into the care homes. That's where most of the deaths happen. I think 43% of all the deaths of coronavirus were in care homes. So we have to protect the care homes and we have to protect the elderly. And if you're caring for somebody elderly, in our campaign, we have people that are caring for the elderly. So we have bracelets that, it's a little blue bracelet and just says Guardian. And that's a way to recognize that you have really frontline people that are caring for their loved ones. And sometimes they wear a mask and they don't want to interact. And we celebrate that. That's good. That's wonderful. And so for the time being, let's give them space and hail them for doing the right thing and the best thing. And that little bracelet, it gives a signal to say, hey, I'm looking after somebody. And so we can celebrate that. That's the way forward. Yes. Waikiki should be open. Yes, the schools should be open. We shouldn't live in a bubble of fear that we're trying to prohibit this virus from moving forward, because anytime you have a viral infection, your doctor will tell you, and you've heard it before, it has to run its course.
Yeah.
It has to run its course. You cannot stop a virus. You can take a therapeutic, which will lessen the symptoms. I know this because I've taken a therapeutic antiviral, Zoravax or Valtrex, for many years for an existing condition with a virus. I've had the shingles virus many times. And so these are treatments that help alleviate the symptoms, and we can move forward in this way. But by focusing always on the numbers, what it does is it keeps us mesmerized, almost hypnotized in a state of fear and panic. But we must recognize that this will pass through most of the population without symptom. If we protect our elderly, it will be like a bad influenza season. But we shouldn't lock everything down and remove freedoms and force children to do school in a bubble, standing on the tape. They can't go to recess. A couple of kids in China wearing masks during recess, they died. I mean, it might be, due to the fact that it's so polluted there, because it's one of the things that the coronavirus is worse in polluted areas. That's why New York and Northern Italy, but Hawaii is great. We should celebrate our health, celebrate our fresh air, and live freely, but in caution, using caution.
Well, let's before we get you going, I know we started this whole conversation. We're gonna have you be fun, but it didn't go that way at all.
I know. I was talking about how friendly I am.
I know you're a fun guy, but yes, we got all this
personality, and then we started talking about government.
Right. So I gotta say this: you're a wrestler. You're a highly acclaimed.
Oh yeah.
High school collegiate wrestler. If you could do it over again, would you want to be a pro wrestler?
A pro wrestler?
Is that, or just because I used to wrestle in high school too, but so I used to wrestle for Kalani, so no rivalry. Okay. Yeah, I know.
Wrestling there wasn't really a rivalry. Football there was, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. But wrestling, we just got the program going later on. But
you got good wrestlers though, yeah.
Right.
The pro wrestler. Well,
being as acclaimed as you are,
it's really hard on your body.
Yeah.
And I did well in high school here. I was two years undefeated, won the state champ a couple of times, and then I went to college. I did well my first year, but and then I took a few years off, and when I went back, I won the national title. But the amount of dedication and work that goes into that is just massive, and it's exhausting, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. Your body breaks down when you have to make weight and those kinds of things. So that puts mileage. I've put some mileage on my joints and stuff. I do my best to keep healthy, but I wonder, if it would be better for because I got my son wrestling for a little while when he was younger, and I think it's good. I love jujitsu too. Just you should always, be able to handle yourself.
Your last name's Stonebreaker. I mean, come on. That's like the greatest name to be a wrestler, jiu-jitsu, whatever.
So my son is Bud, and but then I think I don't want him to be hurting his knees, and his back, or he's got some torn shoulder, and maybe he should just keep surfing. My son loves to surf. We went body surfing yesterday. Me and my dad and my son, 3 generations, Sandy Beach, dropping in on waves together. I'm like, this is the best.
That's better. That's better on the knees. Well, I got this one. Let's end with this one. Let's go back to a serious one again.
Okay.
Sorry, but yeah, this interesting one that came up. I want to talk about, what are your thoughts on the whole 5G rollout? No one's really talking about that. Let's end that one. Let's do that one, then we say bye.
Well,
I'm curious to this one too. So 5G.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of concern with that. And I understand that there have been thousands of studies that show that the frequency or the power of 5G, and the reason why it works for information and data, because it will magnify capabilities, like things like this will be 10 times, like it'll be crazy how amazing things can be. But the downside is that there are many studies that show that it has an effect on a person's immune system and body. Now, I know a woman who has an adverse reaction to regular Wi-Fi signals, and it's been an onset thing in the past couple of years where she cannot have a cell phone around her. She can't be near a router, and she feels it. And so I don't discount these things. just because I maybe haven't experienced that, or many people that I know, it doesn't mean that it's not possible. And it's very feasible. And so these are things that we should pay attention to. And there's another side to it. There's not just the health side. There's the fact that when China installs things, they embed and they take all the information. So, you know, your Zoom call, that they're taking that information, whatever social media platform, they own all of that. They can keep it.
Right.
So they're not limited like, you know, the United States on a lot of privacy and data things. So that's one area where I'd say absolutely not, no Chinese influence in moving forward with that kind of technology. But it's something that we really need to talk about, and it needs to have open hearings. And if we move forward in this area, we don't want to do it under, you know, darkness. Like right now, our government, there's the sunshine laws have been suspended. So a lot of things can be done in the dark, and we don't want that. We want transparency, and we want to be open and honest with the people. So that's one of those areas, but like a lot of things, you know, the windmills, Sherwoods, you know, people want the government to hear them. So when we do that, we'll begin to serve the people. So let's make sure that we have those open forums.
That is.
How did you do by the way, wrestling?
I know, right? I went from wrestling to that, and then that's like another hour conversation. But the 5G.
I knew I liked you for some reason. The moment I saw you, I'm like, wait a second. There's a fraternity here. So what weight did you wrestle?
I was 160.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't
Me
fun.
too. You stayed lean. Well, I was as a junior, I think, and then 171. And in college, I wrestled 167.
Wow.
Scrawny. Yeah, but I weighed 190. So
I got the 187 in college. Yeah. Well, I tell you what. It's great times, man. I thank you very much for joining. I know we could be talking on to the wee hours.
Yes. But, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I thank you for joining. Everybody else here for joining. This was a very eye-opening one. This was great information. And good luck to, we got still a week to go. People still haven't voted yet. You haven't voted yet. I haven't voted yet. So luck can still happen. And good luck to you, sir. And I'll be talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Soon.
Visit me at budstonebreaker.com and come by my Facebook page, or we'll see you here on Instagram. But thanks again, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. I'll see you.